Okay, lovely. At the circle, what we do is that we are reinventing schools and after schools across India that are empowering children in low income contexts to live a life that's filled with opportunity and choice, and to also be able to transform their communities and schools, their country for the better. We do this through the Circle Incubation, which is a 2 year full time program for entrepreneurs who want to start schools and after schools of their own. We also have something called the Circle Labs, which has a lot of short term programming that enables teachers, school leaders, entrepreneurs to really get their feet wet, to think about what is it that they can do in their contexts, access the right kinds of resources and tools and programs to start their journey of reinvention. We have a bunch of cohort based programs. We also do forums like this, which are about an hour long conversation with exciting schools, learning spaces, and people all across the world who are doing some amazing things for children in their context. And that is the conversation that we'll be bringing in today. What we also have is something called a rotational residence fellowship, which is a year-long fellowship where we select educators and teachers who've shown a lot of high caliber across their in their careers, and we place them in innovative schools across the country for a year where they do 3 month rotations in different schools. We have Tanya, Navedita, and Vaishnavi who are a part of the second cohort of this teaching fellowship. They've actually this month they have graduated the fellowship, and they've been some amazing schools like Yellow Train, Riverside, Shikha Academy in Mumbai, and Akanksha schools as well. They are all going to go ahead and do different things to deepen their practice in teaching, maybe start their own learning spaces, and really bring back what they have noticed in these schools to their children in their context. Today, we also have a conversation with our rotational fellows and Sarah and Prachi, who are joining us from Outback Theatre and Think Arts, respectively. Sarah is the creative producer and CEO with Outback, creating powerful arts experiences in Australia for young people in remote and rural communities. Their work spans across New South Wales, bringing professional theatre to where young people live. Sarah and her team believes in co-creating stories that reflect the voices, dreams, and challenges of the communities they serve. Prachi works with Think Arts. It's a Kolkata-based organization that brings high-quality arts experiences like theater, storytelling, and festivals to children and young people across India. She helps design and deliver exciting programs that spark imagination and creativity. Her journey started with Think Arts as a participant, and she is now working as a program associated with the organization. These are two really amazing people associated with amazing organizations who really care about arts experiences for young people, specifically pushing for the fact that learning, whether it's arts or something else, needs to be rooted in the context and community that the young people live in day to day. The conversation is going to be about that. We are going to be hearing from Sarah and Prachi about their organization. The fellows will then anchor a conversation around the topic of today, which is how do you actually navigate context and culture through arts education. And then we'll also open the floor to audience Q&A around 12:15. So hopefully sooner, so that we can also hear everyone's thoughts here. We are a small group today, so I feel like that's actually a great thing. Some of you in the audience I know are also people who work in arts education. So I think let's keep it very interactive. Keep flooding the chat with your thoughts and your questions, and we'll also have space for holding a conversation in the whole group setting. Just checking if Navedita is here, and I'd love to hand over the session to Navedita. Not here yet? Okay, no worries. Sarah and Prachi, how about you go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we'll kick it off from there.
Sure. Prachi, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Sarah. So, hi everyone. I'm Prachi from ThinkArts. As Amina introduced us already. Very briefly, ThinkArts is an organization that's been around for 11 years now. We were founded in 2013, and oh, thanks for the spotlight. And initially, we were founded with the thought process of bringing theater experiences to young audiences, which is a very new field yet in India. And when it sort of began emerging in India, we were one of the first companies to sort of respond to that field. But then we quickly realized that our vision is a little broader than just theater. And so we have been working towards programming, facilitating, delivering various experiences across art forms for children aged 0 to 18 over the last 13 years. I don't work with 0 to 6 specifically, not yet at least, but I've delivered programming for 6 and above. But we have done theater for babies and theater for toddlers, etc. And other arts experiences for them as for that age group as well. Yeah, as Amina mentioned, we have worked across various contexts. We've worked in curating festivals, delivering these festivals, sort of also being invited to festivals, also hosting our own festival. That's one context. We delivered a lot of workshops over the years, either in various sort of spaces, mainly in Kolkata, but also in a lot of spaces in Eastern India. So in other cities in West Bengal and also in Northeast India. In 2 or 3 different cities, yes, and also various other works in various cultural spaces as well. So, such as museums and gallery spaces, public parks, etc. It's a lot of diverse work that we do with the aim of essentially igniting the child's or the young person's imagination through our work. It's a very simple thing of we want the child to understand that they're an equal stakeholder in the conversation that exists in this larger. We'll come to that, of course, in this conversation with respect to arts and the relationship with arts, or even the relationship in the world with arts. Etc. Yes, I've just accepted the caption. Yeah. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we do. I won't go into it too much because it will emerge naturally through the course of the conversation as well. One last thing that I'll mention is we have a focus. It's a very strong focus, which we sometimes struggle to articulate externally on relationship building. So within India, within the people that we work with outside India as well, with Sarah, who knows our founder Ruchira, and she met my colleague Antara, and I mean we all met, of course. We'll get to that, and different ways enriching relationships and how that sort of comes about with the people that you work with, who are adults or who are children, and we will come to that. But that's us in a nutshell.
Amazing. Are you happy for me to jump in? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Prachi. Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's an afternoon from where I am, but good morning to everybody in India and beyond. I'm Sarah Parson, so I'm the CEO and creative producer of an organisation called Outback Theatre for Young People. We're based in a small community of Deniliquin in southwest New South Wales, which has a population of about 7,000 people, so it's very small. We have been based here for 35 years, so we're quite a long and established organisation. I've been the caretaker for about 10 years now, and basically the remit of the organisation, as was so eloquently described in the opening, is to work with young people in the communities they live in. We work across a lot of very remote and regional communities in our state, in New South Wales. A lot of these communities are quite small. They don't have access to arts infrastructure or sometimes even creative programs through their schools or anything. So really we go in there, we connect the community with artists, we develop projects that are consultation based, so really working with the kids and through them the wider community to develop ideas for projects that are open access for those communities to be involved in. We're lucky enough to be state funded through our state government for arts engagement, and because we cover such a large sort of jurisdiction in our state, yeah, there's a bit of sort of pressure to be everywhere all at once. So we have to kind of be quite strategic about the projects we do, and you know, keeping our resources in mind when we you know, deliver things and establish projects. But we have theatre in our name, but we're sort of a multi-arts organisation. So because we're consultation based, it gives us the freedom to listen to our communities that we work in and really engage with what the young people are interested in. We met ThinkArts, and I'm sure this will come out as well, but we've been involved in the last 3 years in a program through the University of Melbourne and AsiaLink, and the AsiaLink Arts Arm, which has connected my organisation with ThinkArts and a few other amazing arts and cultural organisations across the Asia Pacific. So this is our first international partnership, unlike ThinkArts, who are old hands at international partnerships. For us, it's been a real amazing development and learning. And I think for our young people who, you know, they come from areas which are low socioeconomic, not very culturally diverse, you know, there's not as many opportunities as there are in city or bigger towns. So the partnership between, you know, an Asian organisation and the community and the artists that come with that has been really incredible to share with our communities as well. Yeah, I'll leave for that for now, but I'm sure more will come out. But just thanks so much for having me. I'm honoured to be here.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah and Prachi. I think that's wonderful, the work that you do. Friends, as I said, feel free to put in your thoughts and questions as we go along, and we'll open up the floor for Q&A later. And do turn on the captions option if that helps you follow along, and if that makes for a better experience for you. I'm going to hand it over to Navedita, who will just who's also been associated with these organizations and will carry forward the conversation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amina. I welcome everyone who is here today. I'm sorry I got a little bit late because my internet was acting up. So I welcome Sarah from Outback Theatre and Prachi from ThinkArts. You gave wonderful introductions, and the intention for today's session was also to see that, like, I just want to also ease it down a little bit. Of course, there's so much that we do together, but while growing up for me in India, I think arts was always about drawing that proper landscape or doing, you know, like in a classroom, doing the still life, or art is something that only happens in school when there is inspection and you have to decorate your notice boards. Or art is something that happens which is only and only restricted to art competitions, and only selected few in a classroom are gifted with you know, arts. So arts is not for everyone, and I think I grew up with that kind of mindsets around me. And as I work and as a rotational fellows, when we walk around and we look at the schools around, and I know that Circle is also working with a lot of schools, we have been wondering how arts can be used today in our current context, and the futures that we see for our learners and children's, you know, in next 10 years when we have AI, YouTube, how is it shifting the role of a teacher? How does learning shift? And can arts do anything about it? So this was the whole intention, to bring you together and to also dive deeper into what it looks like if you bring arts at the center of learning. So in our classrooms, we will dive deeper into it. We will have some questions. We will look at the presentations that Prachi and Sarah have put together. So just to open, and please everyone feel free to type in the chat, and Tanya and Vaishnavi will also be very happy to respond to you. And if you have any questions that you feel we are going too fast, or you think it's being too slow, please just like remind us. Just wanted to put that. So Prachi and Sarah, welcome once again. I think the question that I would like to start with is, why arts? Why not science? Why not astronomy? Why not philosophy? Why arts? And why is now the right place arts in the education, especially in Indian and the context that you work with? Why do you think arts need to be at the center? If you have something to say about it, and maybe you could also share the presentation if that supports your answer.
Mm.
Sarah,
I think. Sorry, Prachi.
do you want to answer this first?
Yeah, I'll have a think. I think talk. I think that's such a good prompt, Nivedita. Thank you. I think it let's start with arts, but include everything else. So I think let's say yes, arts, but and yes, and that kind of idea that it's not one or the other, but a combination of all of them, or one arts and one other thing, is really where that magic happens. And I know in Australia, there's a lot of really powerful and long-lasting, like arts health, arts justice system, arts medical, arts engagement, arts education. So the pairing of arts with other things, I think, can only kind of deepen and widen the impact that it can have, sometimes on its own, but more so within these contexts. I think it's that combination, especially in the education sense, I would feel. And when you think about learning itself, I think when you learn by doing something fun and enjoyable and creative, it does something to your brain, and it makes it easier to recall, and it makes it make sense in a way that maybe rote learning or reading books or trying to memorize facts like that does. And so I think the power comes in that special magic space of the combination, and trying to find where that combination fits within the context that you're working across. That's what I would say.
Do I need to show any images from the PPT?
Well, for now, if you
But-
think you have
for Sarah, because
to why arts, and then we could delve into the presentation looking at more examples.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, that was a great way to put it, Sarah. The arts, and I mean that's a really pithy, concise sort of way to put it. And also thank you, Navidita, for having me here. The first thing I'll say is from a very personal perspective. I am fairly young. I mean, I've very recently realized that I am what they call an arts manager as well, among other things. And so I'm realizing as I go along, the various things that you can slot yourself into, and they're confusing, right? They become abstract after a point. Like what is an arts manager, what is a cultural worker, etc. And then when you put it like that, so simply, when we are growing up, and then that's what we had to do, and it was a very regimented sort of idea, like, okay, make this and then make that one line and then put that three lines upar mein and then make the kawa, make the crow. So I mean, that's of course that's that prevalent narrative is so powerful because it's still true. It's still true that, even with the NEP and everything, you go to a school or you go to a young child, and often they will be befuddled if you ask them to just draw. If just give them a sheet of paper and say, just draw. Yeah. Even with a prompt, it will be very difficult, I would say, because I've experienced this. So when I say personal, this is what I mean. I used to work as a community librarian in a small Buddhist town, and I've been working with ThinkArts for 2 years now, but I've known them for longer. And while we will come to this thing later, what I'll say is that it was very transformative for me to come across ThinkArts' work, and also for me to be a librarian in a small town like that, and have to engage daily with the children through books and through art, because you see immediately the difference that it makes in their lives. It's really powerful that something as simple as a young child walking up to you and saying, what is a volcano? I have never seen. They have seen mountains, of course, in because this was in Himachal. They have seen mountains, but they've not seen a volcano, and they find it funny to imagine that out of that big rock thing, they can come out this amazing hot thing as well. And so this is, in very simple words, it's just imagining it, right? And this young child can imagine it because they've read a book, and then maybe they can maybe draw it, and then maybe if we have a session on volcanoes, maybe then they can imagine. For this is a very simple example, but
I
yeah,
Yeah, I see that. I think what you shared about bringing that visual sort of dictionary in a child's mind when we are sharing a concept, I think that enhances when we have some stories supporting it or when we have some visual supporting it. Most definitely.
Can
Um,
I add a point, Nav, just quickly about the art access thing? I think I know in example in Australia, a lot of younger primary school teachers, so the younger age groups, they get taught maybe 2 weeks of arts engagement at their university, and so there's this sort of fear. In terms of delving into the art as a tool for learning, that they don't feel like they know enough about it to be able to teach that to young
yeah,
people. But I think that again, that's something that I'm hoping comes a bit unpacked today, is that, you know, that idea of the capital A art that you guys are referring to in terms of making sure it's all correct and, you know, looks like what you've been given, or, you know, it's that sort of remove from ownership that it's something elitist or something that only can be owned by certain people. I think that is part of that, like, sort of changing the way you think about what art is, and what it
Absolutely.
can be, is really important too. Yeah.
It's absolutely important to reconsider how we witness art in education landscape and in our classrooms and in our young people's lives. And absolutely, because as Shanaz highlighted, that in our classrooms, we don't see art teachers also encouraging freedom.
Mm.
So what we, as educators, we always like to ask the questions that we already have answers for. Whereas in arts, which is an ever expanding, imaginative field where anything could come up, like what if the child draws the sun as a square? What if? And then are we as educators ready to deal with it, accept it without having to, like, no, this has to be circle, this has to have rays going on like this. Just saying, for younger ages, of course, as we grow up,
Mm.
we don't even, like, for growing up, I didn't knew like what arts could do. What is a
Mm.
career in arts? My art teacher said, hey, there's
Too.
no career, you can only become an art teacher at the end. There's
yeah,
nothing
Yeah.
that you can do. Growing up, I realized that arts, it opens up career avenues like nothing else.
Mhm.
And of course, you can combine, as you said, Sarah, combining medicine with arts, combining geography or geology or astronomy, philosophy, anything with arts. So that takes me to move to the next question, since time and I can delve into it forever. Just
Me too.
so we could see some examples of how you think, maybe share anecdotally or share a few examples. You could take turns. Um, Share as to how, um, arts has shifted fundamentally for a young person in the context that you work in.
Mm.
Has art shifted anything at a community level, as an individual? Of course, how we measure the impact, that would emerge when we hear the examples. But something that shifted fundamentally. And I think one or two examples would be great, that you feel actually made a difference in a child's life or in a community setting that you work with. Maybe now is the good time where we could also see the presentation and see some visual examples to help what we're talking about.
yeah.
Um,
Shall we
I
not
think,
play the video then? Just the images?
yeah,
yes, you could just say a few things and show us more
Yeah.
examples. Take
Great.
us through it.
yeah, okay.
Um.
Let's do images first, Sarah, and maybe this video later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great idea. I think for us, so what I sort of say, we the art is a vehicle for us, and so really what's going on is deep community connection and engagement, and it happens through art in our context. And I think when we break it down, the way I describe the work that we do, a lot of the sort of hidden curriculum, I want to say, is about shifting the perception of what art is and what it can be for the people that we're engaging in this art form. Because, like we were speaking about before, some people have a very succinct and isolating view of what art is. You go into a gallery, you're quiet, you look at things, all of those things that we all understand. I think the most impactful work that we've sort of done over time tends to happen when it's given the art project is given such wide access that people can be involved in an arts project without actually being involved in art. And by that I mean, we've had some incredible sound designers work for us. And one of them, and this is an example I'll give of that impact. One of the sound designers, our area has been through a 10-year drought before. And so obviously that had a huge impact on not only the environment, but also the people that live in our area that are agricultural and survive off the land. And so we understood that had a sort of an impact on the community as a whole, but also had sort of fed through to the younger generation. They were noticing that there was trauma, and they were noticing that things were changing, and they didn't have a vehicle to sort of understand that as a community. And so a project that we did that was before my time, but I've read and listened and watched so much about it because I just find it so beautiful, was about that drought and was about giving the community a platform to talk about that stuff through the vehicle of an arts project. But there were so many options for you to become engaged that weren't creative if that was something that was intimidating to you. And so this sound designer would go and interview the farmers in their homes. He would go and sit and talk with them. He would record on a device, and obviously they would explain before they got there about, that's all, we're going to ask you some questions. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to. It's just going to be a chat over a cup of tea. It's very low stakes. And so then the farmers felt happy to do that because that was something that was accessible to them. And then the sound designer went and took their recordings and created a piece of music from that. So took the intonations of I don't know how he did it, it was magic. Took the intonations of their voices and created a melody, right? And so then on the night, all these participants were invited to the production and to the project outcome, not knowing how their voices were going to be incorporated into it. And there was some projections on a dry riverbed of fish and things going on, and that song was played, over the top of the projections. And so then it was a moment where the artist could walk with the farmers and say, that's your voice that's made this song. And so suddenly they're so connected to this project. They're able to talk about, the horrors that have gone on in the last however many years. It makes me emotional talking about it, honestly, but it's like, that's what I mean about the vehicle. It's like we are trying to do something for this community and for these young people that will connect them together, that will give them a shared creative experience, that will help them heal from things that, there's no one specific outcome that we're looking for in terms of that community work. But by creating those opportunities for them through a creative endeavor, it allows people to be engaged in something and to have their perceptions shifted about what that something can be. And I think for me, that's definitely one thing that's really stuck in my mind, is that, how can we engage and encourage people to be a part of something when they feel intimidated by that? Because what happens at the end of it is that sense of connection and pride is so strong. So yeah, I guess that's part of the reason why I see what we do is that, like, yeah, here's the art, but all the other stuff is going on underneath as well. So yeah, sorry, that was a really big
No, it's a beautiful story. I think who would have thought the ideas and the voices of farmers could be turned into a piece of music that can inspire others, that can take the story, that can make this experience into a wisdom, into something that is in the back of your mind. You're humming the experience of a distant farmer you don't even know. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that example. And thank you for playing those images at the back.
I wasn't sure this is the correct production.
This was another one actually, and there's
no.
I don't think I put any images of the other one in.
Okay. You also get to see what that work actually looks like in action.
And actually, the artist I was mentioning, that's his projection on that water tower there.
I see.
And so I shared another story, and maybe we'll get to it later, but about two young people who wrote their own monologues for that project, and through the process of doing that, were able to heal from some completely really traumatic events in their life. But again, it was the vehicle of the arts project that provided that opportunity. It wasn't necessarily about, okay, sit down and we want you to heal from this process. It's always just that gentle engagement and community building and all that sort of stuff that leads to the impacts that we're looking for. And I guess just quickly too, someone mentioned in the chat about measuring impact. That is the hardest thing about what we do, because it's ephemeral, but also and anecdotal, but also, there's been a lot of really interesting and exciting opportunities lately for us to partner also with universities. And so we've just started a sort of an evaluation project that's going to try and capture some of that impact in data. And we're not obviously not the first people that have done that, but I'm really excited by it, because for so long it's always been like, no, but it was life-changing, and but how can you prove that? So I think it's always a really good question to ask about the impact measurement. Yep. Prachi.
And
sorry.
Before hear from Prachi, I just also wanted to add that sometimes the measuring of the impact is in the documentation of what you did. So just recording those farmers' voices, voices that have not been ever recorded.
Totally.
And then there's a lot of value in that everyday experience, in that story. Of course, you can't measure the impact over the years for the time that someone will listen to the music, right? How do you know? It is not always easy to measure that impact, but the power lies in the expression. The power lies that the fact something like this is documented now. So Prachi, we're going to hear your example.
I actually wanted to talk a little bit about what Sarah said, because I think, Sarah, I don't know if we contextualize it enough that, guys, Outback Theatre is based in a very remote region of Australia. So the work that they do, the community work that they do, directly serves their community in Deniliquin, and it's been serving that for, Sarah, please correct, 31 years?
35 this year,
years, sorry, 35 years. Yeah, so that's 3 decades in the same town doing so much intensive work, right? So we'll come to that. But Sarah mentioned this one really interesting thing of how people have a certain idea about art that they sort of keep in their heads, and then they don't sort of eschew that idea, because it stays stuck in your head, and then you don't know. I agree with what Sarah said, but also one thing that I think in India it makes sense is that children don't often think of visiting museums or galleries. I'm not saying that like one has to think of it actively and then not do it. And what I'm saying is that they don't realize that in the first instance, they don't realize that these institutions exist, where you can go for free, often in India, often for free, and view all of this cultural history on display. There are multiple factors, of course, that sort of hinder this, accessibility, whether or not there is a school bus that will take you there, whether or not your parent will agree to sign off on your diary or whatever, that, aap jao, yes, you go, etc. Multiple things here at play that I won't get into, not the time. But what we at ThinkArts have often tried to do is bridge this thing, because we're based in Kolkata, but our work has been a little spread out, right? So we've been working in Kolkata specifically, as well as trying to branch out and work elsewhere. So what we try to do is bridge a space with the child, because they won't often know that they are an active participant in accessing this sort of space. So, for example, we did this project at the Kolkata cemetery where they didn't. I mean, so the Kolkata cemetery is a very interesting thing. I used to attend college right next to it, and I knew at least 100 people. And I'm not kidding you, I know at least 100 people. I know for a fact because they told me, who never went, even though it was right next door, right? It was just there, but they never went, even though it sort of chronicles the history of Kolkata in a very turbulent time, in a colonial period, in a very sort of interesting period of its history. But they just never sort of went there. And if it's true for college students, right, 18 plus individuals, it's also true for younger people. They often don't know that this exists and they can just go there. Or if interventions do happen, they happen once in a blue moon, and they're usually just a walk, and the walk is usually for adults, etc. So, and because we really do believe in bridging this sort of gap of children accessing spaces and ideas and art, uh, and bridging that sort of lack, that lacuna there, right? So this project was a public art history intervention where they sort of across a period of 2 years, where two different projects happened. So it was a 1 year long sort of process in both cases, where teenagers, so people 14 and above, children 14 and above, they were sort of led through in multiple workshops through that. So first history, so first the context of this place and how it was set up, and some of the lives of the people. They came multiple times for visits. They saw the graves. They really understood what's happening, as in what were the lives here that were sort of put down, and then how can you trace those lives back to Kolkata and like what they did in Kolkata, etc. Because a lot of these British diplomats, they affected policy, which means they changed the landscape of Kolkata, either architecturally or economically, etc. So a lot of stuff happens, right? Because we live in a society. So this dawned on them slowly, and then eventually they put up a limited exhibition, a temporary exhibition that was there for public viewing for at least a month, I would say. Yeah, and this is all done by those teenagers, and they did a really swell job. Just these two images are just about that. And that's one way. I mean, it's also about measuring. Uh, I mean, we'll come to that question, of course, but it's a very slow thing, right? Of like as Sarah said, it's so intangible. What happens is that you sow a seed. It's like farming. You don't know what will happen. You can't control the circumstances. There are reports, of course, and as Sarah said, people have been doing these reports, but this is all very recent, very new, and I would say that it's still not enough reporting is being done for how stuff impacts younger people, 0 to 18. It's not done, and it's not easy to do that. When we come to this, I will talk about the fact that I have an example of how one can measure impact, just because I have seen how much art has impacted me, and the multiple ways that one can think about art, because art is a process. It's like you do the thing and then it changes you, and you can't sort of know what's happening until much later. It's all about imagination, right? If you can't critically and emotionally sort of think of the other person, or of some idea, then you don't know. It's very simple. If you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes, you don't know what their lives are like, and you don't know how to empathize. You don't know how to grow as a person. It's really, really essential, like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you share this example, Prachi, I'm also reminded of how the role of educator is now the facilitator of the you can't measure care, you can't measure empathy, and therefore the impact of it is also slightly a far off concept. But to be so much in touch with the idea of death, the idea of history, the idea of lives that surround us through your example, Prachi, I feel is tremendous, because often these philosophical or big concepts, as we think, are not for children, right? We don't talk death about, we bring death as a little part in the life cycle. Even in the biology life cycle, it's always like a little egg turns into something, grows into adult, gives the egg back. There's never a death concept happening that it dies as well. You know, so then to bring forth the idea of death, or bring history, or bring archiving as a process, or documenting the process, is very beautiful.
Oh, do we have time, or should we move on?
Yeah, go ahead. You wanted to share an
Okay.
example.
Yeah, no, because it happens through art. So I think Sarah mentioned that in the play that they put up, there was also a lot of there was this one. Maybe this is something you mentioned to me in Goa. I don't remember. I'm sorry. It's about the children having worked with a story which was to do with death, and how that sort of was really emotional for you. Or am I misremembering?
Or maybe it was the example I was giving before about the young people who had their
Right.
parents. Yeah. So that was the show that the image was about. But yeah, that throughout the process of it, their father had passed away, and so they used that process to sort of come to terms with that, and use that process as like a recovery period almost. So that, I guess, the art there was just to hold them as they went through that sort of, grief of what was going on. And the timing was just like it happened, right in the middle of this process of the production. So we were there for the whole experience for them. So yeah, it was pretty incredible and amazing for that young person to have had that community around them while that was going on too.
Yeah, often it's individual instances, right? I mean, of course, it's also a larger instance of involving an entire community as well, but there are also individual stories that sort of stand out. And art engages in the past and also in the future through because it's a sort of a vehicle to sort of drive things forward. So even this project was also about that's I just wanted to mention this project was also about involving teenagers in art space in the Getty Institute Library in Kolkata. And they also have an exhibition space for them to imagine the future through the lens of emotions and just empathy. How, like, what do you want the future to look like for you? And so it culminated in them putting up an exhibition of their own as well, which after a lot of really deep thought into what they want that to look like. And this is something that I think we will talk about later. So I'll just put a pause on that for now.
Yeah, too many things that we have to
Yeah.
talk about later.
So
And
many
yes,
things.
always
Yeah.
to talk about arts, time is never enough. But
No.
I will also now want to just gently get us to imagine. I know it would have been nice if we looked at all the pictures and talked about all the
No.
samples and incredible work that we have done. At the same time, I want to gently move into thinking, how do you think arts, if in the future put at the center of learning, could encourage leadership in young people, could also bring a lot of socio-emotional growth? Because going forward, it's not just the information that young people want, they can access it anywhere. It's how your ethics drive you, it's how your values drive you, it's how your connections are that makes anything relevant in a learning context, right? So to you, my question is then, when you're sharing all of this, do you, of course, you believe in the work, and Sarah, for you to be working in the same space as an organization for 35 years means a lot. You believe in the work, you have definitely seen the impact, and definitely it's scalable, and therefore it's existing and surviving.
And a generational impact as well. Like, we're teaching the children of the people that we taught. Yeah, it's incredible.
It's
I mean, not
incredible.
me personally, but the organization. Yeah.
I'm sure. And for ThinkArts also to have lived for so long and impacted so many young people, going forward and looking backward at the same time in the present, how do you think the 21st century skills, we call them, the leadership, the critical thinking, the problem solving, the socio-emotional growth. How do you think arts can foster that? If you could share 2 to 3 examples or ways you think it can do that, that would be incredible. Whoever wishes to go first, and then we will open space for more Q&As for the participants.
Great. Prachi, would you like to start, or shall I?
Sure. Okay, so this is actually because, see, what happens with the arts is it becomes an organic way of fostering sort of, decision making, collaboration, ownership even. I need to emphasize on organic when I say ownership specifically as well. Obviously, in a simpler sense, in group projects, you learn to delegate, you learn to sort of receive feedback as well as give feedback. Most importantly, you learn to present to an audience, you learn to think of other people. In very, very simple example here of, even when something as simple as putting up an exhibition, of course, when you tell a child that, this is what an exhibition is, we want you to now put up an exhibition, it becomes, and of course, lots of conversations can happen around this, like, why are you using such a this like historical term for this? Why can't it just be like a simpler term for? But we believe that one should trust children. So when you tell them that we are about to do this, let's see what they do, because then they have to think of, maybe they have to think of in a very, if it was a very large event, maybe they have to think of catering. Sorry, it's a very silly example, but I have to say it. Or maybe they have to think of audience turnout. Maybe they have to think of, I am putting up this play maybe here, maybe the seating over here can't exist, maybe they won't get to see anything, so maybe I should just remove those chairs. That's very important, how you think of what's presented to others. And because when you apply it to other places, it becomes very evident. For example, something as simple as a Google form, you think of it in terms of, okay, what is the other person going to sort of fill in? And I'm saying this because I think like this, and I have had discussions with younger peers who also sort of think like this, that okay, after I started thinking of audience, I mean, as in like doing a task for someone else who will view it, I started to also think of it in other ways, right? Because you're doing all of these tasks imaginatively, you're doing all of these tasks usually, hopefully, for the love of it, because they love the art form or the thing that you're doing. Right. And one other thing, and then I'll end, because this is again too much to say over here. Children learn to, young people, they learn to identify emotions, right? We talked about this just right now, just before, because it's that organic, this conversation as well, right? They learn to name grief, they learn to name disgust, they learn to name even love, like they learn to name a lot of things through viewing art. And then this can be again in many ways, through theater, visual art, etc. And then it's the role of the facilitator here, of course, in building these leadership sort of, or this social emotional intelligence for children. I mean, they have to be very sort of careful in how they deliver something, how they sort of facilitate. And in that sense, I think, of course, it's then that can be one way of measuring impact, because then the organization has to ensure that they're choosing its employees in a very sort of, if it's an organization like ours, as if it's ThinkArts or Outback, then they have to think that, okay, are our facilitators empathetic enough? How are they engaging? Do we need to sort of reflect on how we engage? It's a constant process of building these sort of things. And 21st century things develop, etc. Yeah, and then you adapt, right? So if you want, for example, even if one wants to talk about, and we do a lot of introducing classical uh, uh, music to children, because my colleague Antara, she's a musician, so she really sort of does a lot of music workshops. So we don't sort of play classical music and we're like, done, ho gaya, now you tell us what you felt about it. We facilitate, we mediate, so you have to have anchors in the present moment that sort of ground them into what's happening. So for example, someone can listen to that one Beethoven piece, now I'm forgetting, Moonlight Sonata, and one can and then children can think, yeah, it's very sad, this is happening, that is happening, it's very sad, but then you need to prod a little, so you need to prompt them to respond more, you need to sit with them, really listen to the thing, and make it understood that this is not something remote. It's something that is happening right now in this room between you and me, and we're listening to it right now. Because a lot of the times they fail to understand, they, as in all of us, not children, we fail to understand that these like art is like all around us. So there's a very simple example. Moonlight Sonata is everywhere, right? And then when you make that connection, they start thinking. They think, I saw that in that Tom and Jerry episode, and then they make a connection. Or I heard this one time my dad was playing when I was very young. They make a connection, and then they sort of move forward from there, and beautiful things can come out of that. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Prachi, for highlighting how wonderfully it makes you think about others. And when you're putting something for the other, that brings a lot of care in your learning and your expression of learning. And the whole idea of expression through empathy and through care is beautiful.
It is.
Sarah, would you have something to say about it? And then we could open the space for people. And meanwhile, everyone can also type in their questions, and so we could take it up. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah. I think two things come out for me when you ask that question, Nav. I think the first one was that amazing quote that I always pull out from Einstein that says, imagination is more important than knowledge. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but that's the bit that I always, want to throw out to everyone. I think there's a lot of discussion in terms of future proofing young people, which to me I feel sometimes like, give them now. Like, why do we always have to be thinking about what's happening in the future? But I also think and I guess that's another reason why I think art is so important, and what it teaches us is to be present. But I think when we think about what skills humans need and humans benefit from, creative thinking is definitely one of them. And so, by engaging in forms of art that aren't so streamlined and what's the word, like, kind of copying, like you were saying about what happens in schools with, here's your tracer paper, like, do this as I'm showing you, as opposed to what, like what the amazing workshop that Prachi and Antara did in Serendipity was to, listen to this piece of music and respond creatively on the page. Like, there are no wrong answers for things like that, because you're really tapping into the innate imagination and creativity of that young person. There isn't a wrong way to do it. And so I think when you think about these future-proofing skills and what that'll look like in the future, robots don't have imaginations. So
Yeah.
creative thinking is really important, and every one of us has the potential to think creatively, and it's like a muscle we need to stretch and focus on as we go. And I think that starts from very young. Children are innately creative, and I think society and the restrictions we place on them sort of whittles that away as we get older for a lot of people. The other thing I'd say that is really valuable in terms of engaging in art, like I said, it forces you to be present.
Yes.
And I think it also asks of you a certain vulnerability, because you have to look inside for some answers. You can't just give an answer that's already been given and is from somewhere in a book. It's asking you to be vulnerable and present, and to open up yourself to something that it might feel uncomfortable, because it is the unknown, as you mentioned before, Nav. Like, there is that moment where we go, well, what's going to happen? What if they draw a square sun? But what if they do? Like, what is it? It doesn't matter. So I think, when we get really deep down to it, and there's so much about like cognition and the way children learn and all this sort of stuff as well, but I think having the freedom to be engaging in a practice of something where there isn't a way to get it wrong is really freeing. and really teaches you something about yourself as a person, but also about other people, because they're all going to have different experiences in that process as well. And so I think that's something that's really beautiful that can come out of being engaged in art, especially from very young.
Yeah.
The whole non-linear function that art serves, like there's no one linear definitive answer to something, but
Absolutely.
there's a plethora that one could uncover if gone curious. If you have that wonder, you might just discover too many things with that one simple twig in your backyard, uh, with that one little engagement and connection that you build with the cemetery, or one little connection that you build with the farmer, and then it opens up. And you can't be linear about it, like, oh, I'm going to go and do this, and this is what I'm going to learn out of it, and this is my learning outcome.
That's right.
And
I understand that to some people that feels intimidating, and it is a muscle. That's when we practice it. I mean, it was intimidating when we started as well, but it's something that, you know, the more you engage with, the more you open up to, the more you accept, and the more you also, I think, Tanya, something you said earlier about making lots of accidents, you know, lots of mistakes, happy accidents, like that's how we learn. And to show up and be prepared to go through that process and know that it's okay, I think is a really a good way of engaging with art.
Yeah, very true, I think. I realized for me, I think art was something I used to feel like, oh, I can't do this art. I can't do this art. And I remember in my few interactions with Navidita, she used to be like, just do anything you want and I'll make something out of it. And then you see that, you know,
Yeah.
you can actually do art. I think starting from there would be a really great idea that you can do it. And the idea of confidence is actually in not knowing it all and still trying to do it, I think.
absolutely,
The magic is the mess. The magic is the mess.
Yeah.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry. I got excited. Carry on with you.
No, in the concern of time, and I'm sure everyone has a lot to say, and other things might emerge, and we might get to share more examples. So I would now open the space for more questions. Please type in. We have some wonderful observations and questions already being put in the chat. If you want, I could just go through it. So initially, someone had asked about the measuring impact. Zara, you asked. Also, following up on, are programs like this scalable? Is it possible to develop a similar program in another town? Or does it have to be
Absolutely.
born and brought up in the town itself?
Right.
It is actual. Do you have something to say on that, Sarah, or have you already answered?
Yeah, I mean, yes is my answer always. I mean, I think that's a really important thing, is that none of us are writing the rules, as you know, about these things. I think the main thing about making projects like this is that you can sit and take time and listen to what's needed from your community, but everything is scalable. I mean, like from Prachi's example of the project in the cemetery, or you know, something with, we've done you know, a little mural with 6 students. So you know, I think once you've got your intentions and your goals from your community, and through that consultation process, the scale will just appear. But yeah, I think you know, there's a lot of onus on big, you know, outlandish arts projects and big outcomes and things, but sometimes the smallest things can have the biggest impact, because the sort of relationship between the facilitators and the young people in the community is kept at a certain level. So yes, definitely, I would say. Prachi, what would you say?
No, I agree with everything that you just said. All of Zara's questions are actually so interesting. They're kind of congealing for me. But this specific question, is it possible to develop a similar program in another town, or does it have to be? If you mean, I mean, Sarah's answered it, but if you mean from the perspective of, you know, maybe there's not enough exposure or something like that, that two things there. One is I was exposed to a lot of art forms in my life through the internet. So when we also talk about 21st century sort of like what's happening in the current era or whatever, I think we should absolutely talk about the internet, because I think it's it's important to take town and what you want to be there in your town. When you think of these questions, then it's really then you start understanding more of, you know, what kind of interventions can you actually plan for your for your uh, for your space wherever you might be. Because I found out about jazz through the internet. So if someone was going to be a snob to me on the street that you don't know jazz, I don't care. I know jazz in my own way, and I will do my best to find out more about it. And that's why I kind of fell in love. I'm sorry, I really like thinkers because they did this one jazz workshop, and I went there thinking that, oh my God, people are going to be snobs to me or whatever. I was fairly young. I was like 17. People are going to be snobs or whatever. And but then it was very nice, very warm, very inviting. What they did was they invited a jazz musician who's been practicing her craft for since she was a baby, so 20 years for her, who all she did was she just sat there and she invited you to play with her. And she also walked you through
Oh.
what jazz can be, of course. When you break things down to their basics, the way Namitita did it for Tanya, it's very simple. You know, when you practice something, you do the craft, and then you can sort of take it forward. Developing on the craft is where ThinkArts comes in or Outback comes in, because we are doing the work of trying to develop stuff for our audiences, for our communities, etc. That comes later. But then the first thing that should come is understanding your relationship with like where you are and what you want to be there, etc. And then impact is immediately measurable from there on forward, because when you consider these questions, other things, we exclusively work. I mean, of course, we work with other people. We have made a decision to work off late because we're a very small organization and we don't know where funding is coming from. We don't know what our programming looks like for the year. We know what we want to do, but what is actually going to be implemented is, yeah, it's a it's a whole thing. So we work with people that we have known before because it organically happens. They come back. I came back to ThinkArts. I thought that one day I would like to do something, maybe an internship. They had a job opening. I applied. I'm here now. It's been 2 years. I would like to be here for, and we'll see. Anyway, but I love them. I want to be involved with them. And people who've interned for us, Omo, who was there with Navidita, Sarah, and I, and Kuba, which is, we didn't touch upon that, but we were there doing a project. Anyway, Omo she was involved in, sorry, they were involved in one of the projects, one of the art history projects that I mentioned. And then they remembered, and then they followed, and then they sort of reached back saying, hey, can I do something? And you were like, oh my God, hello, here is a thing for you to do. It's that organic, and it just sort of, and those individual relationships are also how you can measure impact.
That's true.
That also brings me, while Prachi, you're sharing, Zara very interestingly mentioned that, and I want Zara to also speak a little. We would invite you to please share your thoughts and your interest and where you're working, so we could also have a very personalized understanding of where you are. Maybe talk about your questions when you're saying artists aren't always great teachers. I want to know more about it. Maybe let's hear from Zara what she has.
That's a great point, Zara.
I thought this session was amazing. I mean, you guys are both like, I would wish I could give you a hug on Zoom, because like, what you have done and what you continue to do is just incredible. It takes so much warmth and love and patience and like real dedication. I'm tearing up talking to you because it's been really moving.
Well, sending love back to you. We're so thankful. That's such a lovely thing to say.
Thank you. So I think that I resonated with so much that was said, and the reason for my questions are because there's this gap in the nonprofit world between like feeling things are good and then things looking good on paper and getting the funding for them to do it. And I think that Nandita, thank you for giving me that opening, but like in a lot of that bridge building, right? Like when you're working with artists who are doing really incredible things, there's also like, I feel like both Sarah and Prachi have to be like community leaders and also creatives, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like this leadership role that you also like, you have like very creative people who aren't really positioned to like talk about what they're doing. There's a lot of benefit, like maybe they could sit with a pottery wheel and like the benefit and impact for those kids to like be with that person would be tenfold, but they wouldn't be able to talk to a single parent about it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
100%.
and I think that like a huge challenge that I feel is that like kind of as a single person in an organization to kind of bridge that constantly is very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you have that momentum in a community, like Sarah, like in your community, like it feels like it's kind of snowballed. So like people really believe in it. And I'm sure it's not that I'm saying that there aren't challenges, but where you kind of like people become advocates for it based on their own experiences, they like vouch for you. But when you're in a situation and like, especially in India, where there's like so much basic poverty and hardship,
Yeah.
to get to a place where you're like, no, like don't send your kid to tuitions, like come here and do theater. It's like, who are you?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
and you don't have any idea what I'm struggling with. And like really finding the creative people who can also on that level, like at a community level, engage and figure out, okay, this is a mural that could be impactful or healing. And like, it's just really challenging to fill that gap. And I think, you know, Prachi and Sarah, like a lot of what you've said has like given me a lot to think about, but I'm still like working here on the ground. And there's like so many different aspects of it, right? Like there's a communal aspect of it, like there's a socioeconomic aspect of it. There's like there's poverty, and then there's like drug addiction, and then it's just survival, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is like the point that a lot of, you know, and the reason why STEM is very comforting to like donors, et cetera, is they're like, you'll get out of this, right? And like, you know, whether we're seeing anxiety or depression or like the pseudo autism and like all of the stuff that we're seeing on the ground, the problems are so big. And art is so, like, I think somebody used this word, like, it's a lot about community. I don't know if Prachi or Sarah, like, about community building and relationship building. And that is slow work. Like, it's just slow. And there's no shortcut. And you've got to, like, and like what I was explaining to somebody before is, like, how many people, like, with their kids are like, okay, you need to get there. So just do it, right? Like, here are all the books. Here's where you have to, like, take the time to connect. But it's like, honestly, it's so exhausting. And I sometimes feel like giving up repeatedly and going back to the STEM model. But we're really trying. And I would love to reach out and like learn more from both of you as to what you're doing.
I would like that too. You have like that has just given me so many things to think about. Like, yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I would say I feel the same as you. Even despite all of the things I've said, I too work in not-for-profit. I know the struggles. Like I understand how hard it is to sell what we do, and by sell I mean in time. You know, like we don't charge for anything either. We can't. It's a barrier for access. I think, yeah, there were so many things in your sharing then that I would love to unpack, and yeah, we have got minimal time, but I think don't give up because the yes, STEM has like, you know, there are obvious and tangible results that can come from that, but at what cost? Like if you ignore everything it is to be a human, connection, culture, community, all of the stuff we're talking about, at what cost, you know? And I think it's, you know, that as you were talking, I was thinking about those incredible like clowning workshops that people do in refugee camps and how they exist because they bring joy and they build connection and they build community. Like they're not making those kids learn maths, right? So there's something in what we do that is powerful enough to make that change and to build that empathy and to bring that connection. And I get completely what you say about being exhausted. While our communities know about us, every time we start a new project, we start from scratch. So I now have to go back in because it's been so long since I've been in one community, you know, because we cover 30,000 square kilometers and all the towns within that. So I'm not everywhere all at once. And it starts again from scratch. It is that thing of showing them this is going to be worth your time, I promise you. And I know you have to pay $10 to go to karate. And I know that means you don't have enough money to pay for anything else, but I don't want your money. I want your time, because this is what your young person might get out of that experience. But it's a hard sell, and I'm right there with you. And I just hope someone took note. Oh, we're recording, good, because I want to like go back and unpack all the things you said and answer them specifically separately. But like, thank you for sharing, I think. And thank you for doing what you do, because like that's the reason we're all here, really, when you boil down. Yeah. Prachi.
Thank you.
I was just saying, Sarah, that was, yeah, no, Sarah's right. We have to sort of go back and listen to each question individually.
Yeah.
The thing I have to say immediately is that, the thing that happens, Sarah, when you sort of, is when you work with children, young people, okay, and here I do mean just under 18, and then the parents sort of comes up to you and says, okay, how do we measure this? Which is, I think, also a source of a lot of what you struggle with, because we deal with this as well, where they constantly say, okay, so where is a certificate? Okay, you did this thing, this abstract thing. Where is the measurable thing that I can show that my child went to this event by ThinkArts? This amazing person came from like abroad or whatever, or this person from across India came. But we don't do all that. We don't believe in doing all that, because it's not, that is not how we are measuring the, we will obviously, you have worked with us, you have performed a specific form of labor, that is, of course, you get a certificate for that. That's a different thing. You get a letter, that's completely different. But this is something completely different. Actual engagement with children, with young people, it's very difficult. It's very I understand your source of exhaustion as well, and I would say a very tangible way of sort of going about it, which maybe, when you don't have to divorce, you don't have to go back to STEM, you just have to do the thing, they call it STEAM now, just like integrating arts into STEM. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a movement, there's a free library movement happening in India, which is essentially a lot of people setting up their own libraries, community libraries in their spaces across various states, and then art is practiced within those institutions, and then the books are curated, etc. And so, like, there are ways of making it accessible to different sort of groups. And then when you create that sort of, for the lack of a better term, oasis, or just this space that you create, and you are operating it the way that you want it to, people will come. People will come. The problem again is these structural issues of funding in India, especially because a lot of us may know, state funding is a very it's a concept, all right. It exists somewhere else. We rely heavily on. I mean, Thinkers doesn't rely on CSR, but a lot of people in non-profit in India rely on CSR, and they rely on fundraising, and it's really difficult. And you don't have that, then how do you do your work? And then a lot of ethics and things come in. It's really, really, really hard. So I am also giving you a hug, and I'm telling you that there's no way but to just sort of trudge through it, and just to believe in what you're doing, because it's arts is really a space which is intangible. It's very intangible culture. You cannot measure it immediately. It's only later that you can measure it. For example, we had to shut down certain programming that we used to do last year. And what happened as a result is that we made a conscious decision to step away and do other things. But people started suddenly popping up and saying, hey, but that one thing we want to. But then, it's really sad that you have to make certain decisions, but people still remember and still want to come back. But yeah, it's policy level, and then organizational level things, arts are just a scan right now, but we are trying to work towards increasing it. Like in India, not we think us, all of India is trying to, a lot of places in India are trying to work towards, yeah.
And working through hardships becomes easier when we believe in the work. If we see the value, we are able to show the value, is what I would say. In the classroom, where we are trying to integrate arts with the histories, we are trying to assess children differently through their puppet theater production, or through their human library stories, or through their comics. How about we read a chapter to the students in the classroom and get them to make a comics about it, instead of just answering plain questions and answers. And those are some of the practical ways. Of course, the fundings and the disbelief in the work that we do, because we can't produce numbers as they want to see it. I'm sure when we can produce products as a part of intensive processes, things happen. and once we believe in it, things happen. So Tara, thank you for sharing that, and Prachi and Sarah, that I would like to open the space for anybody else who has any more questions, because I want to be more concerned of the time.
I know, my gosh.
Intervening in between. So please share, and please feel free to come on unmute and ask your questions. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Navita. I'm just quickly going to voice over Shanaz's question in the chat. She's asking, schools today do not give enough art exposure to children. Mostly it is restricted to art and craft class and a drawing class once a week. How can schools change this? Sarah and Prachi, if you want to respond to that, or Shanaz, if you want to add something to that before.
I'm happy to jump in if that's helpful. Shanaz, would you like to add anything to the question?
No, please go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, great. So I would say when we gave that example at the very beginning about art and, that's when I'd start to think in terms of an educational context. And I know that when all of us were having conversations about what we wanted to cover in this forum, one of the things that came up was about integrating art into other areas of the curriculum. And I think that's where, you're trying to separate the idea of capital A art from kind of creative experiences and creative thinking. And so you don't necessarily need to go, I need to integrate art into all of my other areas, but it's how can I encourage my students to think about these other areas of focus in the curriculum in a creative way. And one example I shared, because for a while I was engaged to do just that with a group of teachers in Canberra in Australia. And so each term I would work really closely with a primary school teacher on whatever subject was being covered that term. And for one term I had geography, and that term, the ideas they were exploring was about Antarctica and exploring Antarctica as a territory and what that looked like and all that sort of stuff. And so the way we integrated art into that, not capital A art, but just sort of creative thinking was, suddenly we're asking the students to write from the, the explorer's perspective. What are you seeing? How are you feeling? Write your journal. What does your journal say when you're halfway through an Antarctic expedition and you're freezing and you're missing home? So suddenly you're putting a creative lens on something where they're learning about the practical things as well. And we also did an activity with the teacher in role, where they sort of facilitated the kids to go on that exploration themselves. So, okay, everyone, I'm the lead scientist and today we're going on an exploration. Pack your bags, we're off. And, it's as simple as that. And then you sort of use their knowledge of what they've been given to sort of give them the roles of being the explorers. And then maybe you put like a pile of blue fabric in one corner of the classroom and that's the South Pole, and maybe you put another piece over here and that's the base for the night or whatever. So I think it makes it hard for you to then say I need to do art and all of this other stuff, but I also think art is so flexible and adaptable that you can weave it into all of the other stuff you're teaching anyway. Another quick example is, I don't know if you guys do this in maths in India, but we always got taught our times tables with a song. So, the 5 times, so you're learning the maths, you're learning the information, which is your times tables, but in a creative way because it rhymes and it's a song and that helps you remember it. And another example of that exact thing is, in maths or science, when you've got those really big equations that, you need to break down into, I can't even remember the maths of it from my primary school, but, a lot of the examples are they'll write an acronym for what the formula is, and then turn that acronym into a poem, so that by reciting the poem, they remember the formula for the science or the maths project. So that, I think, I can understand how it gets really intimidating when you're thinking, how can I introduce a whole nother subject into this subject that's already existing? But in actual fact, that's where that art and really works, because there's so many ways you can integrate it subtly and meaningfully, where it actually makes your job easier. Yeah. Sorry, that was a ramble, but Prachi, if you've got anything to add.
I do actually, but there's one other question that Shanaz had that I want to sort of address together. Wait, sorry, I'm just looking for it. Actually, I'll just begin. Shanaz, science is often so much about, I mean, I think we already talk about this a lot, but then it's about like inquiry and discovery and all of that stuff that we sort of forget, because I know maybe, I don't know if you're a teacher, as in a school space, but I know what happens is the teachers face this pressure of results as well, of the child sort of delivering a certain marks or a certain sort of understanding of a topic, ये cover हुआ कि नहीं, or this chapter done or not, etc. But um it's really hard to sort of actually do what Sarah mentioned of like inculcating an approach to a certain chapter or to a certain topic as opposed to taking the thing off, because and then I struggle with this as well when I used to, because often you face ridicule by the young participants of this thing, because they start thinking this is not something we have ever done, why this now, and why this suddenly in this way, but it's actually really helpful in the long run. A lot of things are going wrong with the world, of course, and this current moment. But I will never forget this one moment where this one child sort of came up to me and said, "Okay, but why is this country portrayed in this way?" And then I said, "But why do you think so?" Just a simple exchange of question and answer, and that was really I will never forget it, because the child, just by that simple interaction, by really engaging in that moment with that person, they really sort of change their perspective on the thing. Because if you just ask the why, they start thinking, and then of course you have to supplement the why in the process of teaching with examples, for which you have to be then informed, for which you then have to know your stuff, for which then again you have to do your research. And that is the intensive part, being sort of knowing what to sort of say or how to contextualize things for them. For example, if one could contextualize for the children that, hey, don't use AI, maybe because it's killing the planet, or something, or like when you contextualize things and then they sort of see it, then it gets them thinking. It's difficult with adults. I'm not saying adults are ossified rocks. I'm saying that it's easier when we're working with younger people to sort of say, hey, this is also a way that you can live or you can think, and then things can change from there. That's all. It's just a process. Again, it's really intangible, but then it's just about trying to be the best person that you can be. The way Zara said that, it's a lot about leadership. You have to assume this role of leadership, this role as leader, but not at the same time, not if you're teaching, if you're an arts educator, or if that's one of the terms that you can use for yourself, then at the same time, not I would say thinking of it as a hierarchy. Yeah, it's because it's really not. I mean, it could be that they call you teacher and ma'am and everything, which is fine. I mean, that's a thing. But not thinking of them as as you are imparting unilaterally this information, because it's not an equal exchange, of course, but at the same time it's also a sharing. It is a sharing, because you of course may know something that someone that they might not. At the same time, their impressions of the world and how they perceive things is also information for you, and the various other things that technical and whatever we can not the time to get into. But yeah, but basically viewing them as a stakeholder in this conversation with the world at large is what sort of can help one just go about their work as facilitator better, I feel. Because you think of things in a more holistic way, which is what we've been talking about throughout this conversation, right? You think of institutions in the city, you think of the way you eat food, you think of the music that you hear, where is it coming from, what is a sample, what is a like who is this artist emulating, and then what's going on, and all of these things just come up naturally once you just sort of have that spirit, the way of thinking, and yeah.
All right. Friends, just in the interest of time, I'm quickly going to circulate a very short poll I know there are a few more comments in the chat box. You can take some time to respond to that as I open this poll up. Just take a few seconds and just drop in your responses into this, yeah? All right. Hopefully you can see it on your screen.
Yes.
Honey, is there a way, have we like recorded the comments as well? Great.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm conscious that we're obviously not going to get to everyone's questions, but happy to continue the conversation however it fits for everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Really fantastic things in there.
These questions are amazing. I love them. Thank you.
I know, me too. Thank you,
also, I
everyone.
think Sarah and Prachi, if you could just share your email IDs
Yeah.
and your, the link to the website as well for the people in the audience to know. If they want
course.
to say continue, go and explore and reach out to you and connect to you, that would be
Of course.
great.
Right. A few more folks to fill in your responses. I'll just keep this open for like 10 more seconds.
And while we're just doing that quickly, is it all right if I just respond to Zara about the artist thing really quickly? When we were doing our project together at the Serendipity Arts Festival, we were doing an artist's EOI for the people to come and join us to do the program. Again, the art was secondary. So what we actually looked for was people that were community engaged and had done that work before, because that was the kind of person that we needed. The fact that they were artists was a bonus. So that's how, because I understand completely what you mean. The community engaged practice is the important bit, not necessarily the art. I mean, obviously it is, but yeah, that's how we made it work.
The approach. Yeah. Like if you believe
Yeah.
in particular things, then even if you might think of the art the way the person is practicing their art as maybe you don't like it, to be very honest. If maybe you don't like it, but then you work together and then you both sort of are exposed to each other and then to the world and to other art forms, and then you change and you evolve. So yeah.
Right. I think with that, I think it's time. We would
Thank you,
love
everyone.
to carry on this conversation further, though. So thank you so much to both of you for sharing your social handles. And thank you all, actually. Thank you so much, both of you, and Tanya, Navedita, and Vaishnavi, for holding this space, and for everyone to be super engaged throughout on a Saturday morning. Thank you very much. And yes.
Thank you, Suhani, for that. But so as we come to the close of today's session, I want to just take a few moments to maybe recall and see where we are right now. So we began by exploring a powerful idea that the arts are not just an expression, but a transformation. And we have seen how creative practices can open up new ways for young people to engage with themselves and the world around them. We also delved into the possibilities of making it happen in the classroom setup, the practical side of it. It's inspiring, at least for me, to think of the classroom not just as a space for instruction, but a space for shaping these empathetic, empowered individuals. So, very heartfelt gratitude to our wonderful resource persons, Sarah and Prachi, and also for Navedita for asking such thought-provoking questions. Her questions are always amazing, makes us think to the depths of it. So yes, and finally, thank you for all the participants for being here, paying attention, and bringing all your curiosity. It was amazing to listen to the conversations. So yes, let's carry forward the ideas we have come across today. And I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to weave in all the practices that we got to know today in our classrooms and any education setup that we are working with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank you, everybody.
And I'm sorry if someone didn't understand Hindi because randomly I was speaking Hindi. I'm really sorry about that. I have a bad habit.
Inclusivity for the win.
No, Sarah doesn't know.
No, I pick it up. It's fine. Someone said tika, and I was like, I know what that means.
And you backed it up with the sandwich process. You were like Hindi and going back to English and again going back to Hindi and again going back to English. So that helped.
When Sarah was here in Goa, I was speaking to, oh, this is still recording. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was speaking